On this day, the 22nd of November, 1837, William Lyon Mackenzie issues to the people of Upper Canada a call to reform and rebel against British rule in what is now Ontario. William Lyon Mackenzie is, the grandfather of William Lyon Mackenzie King, the Canadian Prime Minister who was in power for about 20 years throughout parts of the 20s, 30s, and the Second World War, only resigning after the Second World War. Very successful Prime Minister. His grandfather was born in Scotland and moved to Upper Canada. He was a radical and admired the American system of government. And at the time, Upper Canada was a bit shambolic. It was run by a narrow group of people, usually Anglican, Tory, and very loyal to the Empire. And they kept all power to themselves. They ran the banks, they ran the assembly, they ran the schools and the universities, the church, and between them they would carve out their own fortunes and didn't really pay too much attention to the rest of the people in the province. This caused resentment, although usually it wasn't a rebellious resentment. In 1837, a rebellion had begun in Lower Canada, what is now Quebec, in Montreal. Many of the people involved weren't actually French, they were British as well, Montreal being a very Anglo city at the time. But it did inspire people in Upper Canada to try to make a similar sort of stand. And so William Lyon Mackenzie issued to the people of Upper Canada. He had been, at sometimes, elected to office, to the nascent Parliament of Upper Canada. He had also been the first mayor of Toronto. So he wasn't a nobody. He wasn't completely lacking influence. Now, he did meet with other reformers, and at first it was about getting people to nominate representatives to a congress to be held in Toronto to discuss their grievances, very much based on the American congresses before and during the American Revolution. It was planned that they were going to start the rebellion on December 7th of that year. Seems to be a terrible time to start a rebellion right in the middle of winter. But in fact, it started on December 4th when some other rebels started the rebellion and took parts of Yonge Street, which is in Toronto now, and a tavern, which ended up being a battle. Now, Bond Head, who was the lieutenant governor of Upper Canada, didn't believe the reports when he received them. He was told by many people that something was going on. Leaflets had been given out by the rebels calling for a rebellion. People had been practicing with guns, shooting, and there had already been some influence and help from Americans over the border. But he still didn't really believe it. So, the rebellion was about to start. So, on the 7th of December, the day that the rebellion should have started, rebels arrived at Montgomery's Tavern. Some of the rebels encouraged the rebel leaders to disperse, feeling that the rebellion couldn't be a success. their advice was rejected, and so then they started entrenching and defending their position at the tavern. Mackenzie King is his grandson, didn't want to do this. He wanted to directly attack the government troops. Now, when they did come, the government troops, to the tavern, shooting started, but the problem was the rebels saw the front row fall to the ground. Now, they fell to the ground to allow people behind them to start shooting, but the rebels thought they'd been shot, so they dispersed in a panic. Government forces continued to march, and at Montgomery's tavern, they shot a cannon ball into the dining room window. The rebels then fled, and the rebellion was broken. So then Bond Head, Lieutenant Governor, ordered the tavern to be burned, and the rebels arrested. It was a bit of a farce in many ways, but combined with the rebellion in Lower Canada, and with the ongoing attacks from the United States, because Mackenzie and his men and some others went over the border and would attack over the border. This went on for a few more months. This caused alarm in London. So what they did was they recalled Bond Head, and they replaced the governors of North America with a fella called John Lambton, 1st Earl of Durham, popularly known as Lord Durham. He was made Governor General of British North America and issued a report that called for the complete reform of how Canada was governed. This report is very famous in Canada because it's the basis of what happened later in 1867 when Canada became a confederation and started the Dominion of Canada, which is what Canada is. They dropped Dominion back in the 60s, but that's where it began. So although this rebellion was a bit of a farce, it did alarm people back in London. They didn't want another American revolution that they knew they probably wouldn't win because the Americans would probably get involved and take it. So they didn't want to get involved in another big long drawn out war. They didn't like the fact that people they had appointed were in cahoots with the local elites and running the place into the ground. So they reformed it completely, really, making it the first country, autonomous country within the British Empire, within 30 years. So, on this day, the 22nd of November, 1837, William Lyon Mackenzie issues the pamphlet to the people of Upper Canada. This led to the rebellion, the farcical rebellion, but ultimately to the reforms that laid the foundations of modern Canada. If you like these videos, comment, like, and subscribe. Come back tomorrow for more.